Serverless computing helps developers to focus on building applications while eliminating the need for them to manage infrastructure as cloud providers allocate machine resources on demand, taking care of the servers on the behalf of their customers. In this video, we'll be covering what is serverless computing, difference between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, what is cloud virtualization and cloud containerization, graphical user interface and command line interface, Azure App Service, DevOps Lifecycle, and publishing app in Azure. In the end, we will also share details about a free Azure Administrator Masterclass, which will not only help you understand basics, but it will also give you an idea of the learning path to follow. It would be helpful, especially when you're preparing for Azure Administrator Certification, which requires you to clear the Microsoft Azure Administrator Certification exam. That's AZ-104. For the certification exam, you should have an understanding of serverless computing. Welcome to another episode of Azure video series from K21Academy, where we take you from complete beginner, covering networking, storage, data protection, to all the way monitoring, governance, and compliance, including how to prepare for the AZ-104 certification exam. We have taken a clip from one of our certification training program on Azure Admin. That's AZ-104. And in this clip, our instructor will talk about serverless computing. So, this is a clip taken from a module on serverless computing. Now, let's hear from an expert trainer on the same.
It's the serverless computing. If we see the last 50 years of compute, we started with mainframe and then we moved to PC era wherein we have the client server architecture. In the early 2000s, we started with virtualization, and then in the mid 2000s, around 2010, the cloud era started. Now, this is the start of a new era, which is your serverless era, which is as of 2020. Now, what is this serverless and what are all the services that we have in Azure for serverless? Before even understanding these, we need to go to whiteboard to understand some of the basic differences of virtualization versus containerization. What is the difference between the GUI and the CLI operating system? What is monolithic? What is microservices? And what are the differences between these two? And we also need to understand the complete DevOps lifecycle. Of course, I'm going to give a very basic introduction in a layman term so that you can understand the concepts of serverless computing a bit more. So let's move on to the whiteboard. These are the three basic concepts that we are going to see now. And with this understanding, we will move on to Azure App Services. That's the name of the product or the service that we are going to work on. Before getting into App Services, we will see all these three concepts one by one. So we are going to have a quick comparison between IaaS and PaaS. Let's do one thing. We will make a table of both pros and cons. Here we are going to write about pros and here we are going to write about cons of both IaaS and PaaS. The first thing which comes into our mind when it comes to the advantage of IaaS is the control. I have the complete control of it. And when you see the disadvantages of IaaS, that's heavy maintenance. And on the other hand, we have PaaS, wherein it's maintenance free. And at the same time, if I want to customize anything, I will not be able to do it because of lack of control. Now today, whatever we are going to learn, these are the two things which we need to keep in mind. For both web apps and Kubernetes, of course, it's going to be maintenance free, but you cannot have the complete control. Whatever is the option that you have, which is the default option of Azure, we need to live with that. Now with this, we will move on to the comparison of virtualization versus containerization. We are not going to compare between the on-premise and cloud here. This is between the cloud virtualization versus cloud containerization. In virtualization, the base layer is the hardware and we have the operating system on top of it. On top of the operating system, we have the virtualization software. In the case of Microsoft, it is always Hyper-V. If it's VMware, then they use ESXi. On top of the virtualization software, we got the ability to slice the hardware into multiple pieces, and we are going to call it as virtual machine. Virtual machine needs to have the guest operating system on top of it. Let's take one sample example here wherein I have three developers to develop a particular program, and one person is on Python, another person is on Java, another person is a .NET developer. Now, how are we going to establish infrastructure for these three employees for both virtualization and containerization? Let's see the difference. On top of the guest OS, we already have 5 layers, and we have the virtual machine here. On top of it, we have the guest OS. The guest OS need to have the runtimes, the libraries, and also all the other dependencies. Now, on top of it, they can have their application. They can work on their app. Now, this is overall 7 layer, isn't it? Now, imagine you have at least two VMs in your laptop. Your laptop is going to be very slow. But in the same laptop, I can run at least few hundreds of containers. How? Let's see the containerization layer now. We are discussing about the underlying architecture. It starts with the hardware, and also we have the operating system. On top of the operating system is the game changer. That is your container engine. Some people call it as Docker engine because Docker is the key player in the market. Even if you take the Azure Kubernetes or Azure container instances, Docker is the heart of the container engine. And on top of it, they can have their apps straight away, which is the containerized app. And look at the layer here. We have only 4 layers. It is lightweight, and at the same time it is easy to boot up. It takes few seconds for a container to come up. That's the architectural difference between virtualization and containerization. The concept behind serverless is containerization, and that's why industry is moving heavily towards containerization, wherein it is platform or it is runtime free. We will see a quick comparison between a GUI and CLI operating system. Whatever we are discussing from the previous page, they are not relevant to one another, but we are trying to understand some basic concepts. So there is no relation between page 1, page 2, and page 3. So the GUI operating system keep Windows. And let's take Linux this side. We have hardware. Here also we have hardware. On top of hardware, we need the kernel so that it can convert the commands into machine understandable language, which is zeros and ones. On top of kernel, we have the user interface, which is shell. The only difference between CLI and GUI is in CLI, we work on top of shell. We write the commands on top of shell, and then it goes down to kernel. Kernel converts it into zeros and ones. In Windows, it's not the case. In Windows, we have one more layer. We have multiple application wherein we work only with the application. Clicks, right clicks, drag and drop, everything together gets again converted into commands, which is transferred to kernel, and kernel converts it into a machine understandable language. Now we need to understand this part of it because this is very important for us to understand Docker, and that's how we are going to work on Docker. This is not a GUI, it is a complete CLI wherein we will have shell, and on top of it we have to execute the commands, and then below the shell we have the kernel and the hardware. Let's go back to our second concept. Now this is very important for us. Virtualization. On day one, completely we have created virtual machine in availability set, availability zone, and we have also created Ubuntu machines, Windows servers, and so on. Now, can I move my compute resources from virtualization to containerization platform? Yes. And one of the product which supports customers from Microsoft side, specifically when the customer is running an app, it is App Services. Azure App Services. In order to understand app services, we need to first understand the app service plan, app service domain, and also app service environment. In virtual machine, we have something called SKU, store keeping unit, wherein the configuration of a particular server in the name of SKUs, which is B series, D series, L series, H series, A series, and go on. In app service, the plan gets converted in the name of ACU, Azure Compute Unit. It comes with pre-bundled configuration. Now let's go back to our first page. As we said, no control. Yes, exactly. We will not be able to come up with our best configuration. We need to choose from any one of the configuration which is given by Microsoft, which comes pre-bundled. App service domain. I can buy domain from Azure. I don't have to go to GoDaddy or BigRock to buy a domain. While I'm designing my app or website, I can purchase domain from Azure. That's a fantastic option for many of the customers who wants to keep the services under one umbrella, isn't it? Environment. What kind of environment? Is it Linux or is it Windows, which is my base environment? Am I going to put the code or do I already have a containerized application? Instead of understanding these from the whiteboard, let's go ahead and create a quick app service plan. And also, we will try to understand the DevOps lifecycle of CI/CD so that we can do a couple of deployment slots in that app service and play around with an app. Let's go ahead and create a quick app. I'm in the portal and I have a resource group called Serverless. Now I'm going to choose from the app service. I see app service certificates, domains, environments, plans, and a combination of all four will be in app service. Instead of creating all four, I need all in one page. So I'm going to click on app service. Choose the resource group, give a name to your app. I'm going to give it as Tech K21 Tech. Do you already have a code or do you already have a containerized application? I don't have. I'm going to get the basic code and we need to choose the runtime. From here onwards, your environment starts. Here I'm going to choose .NET Core, which is the basic one. You can choose anything. Choose the region, which is East US. I'll leave the name as basic one and we are going to focus more on the ACU. This is the SKU and size. It is called ACU, Azure Compute Unit. There are three different categories: dev test, production, isolated. And please do not confuse this dev test plan with the dev test labs of your Azure DevOps. If you do not understand this, well and good, please leave it. Under dev test, I do have a very interesting plan, which is F1, wherein the app service plan is free. Customer who wants to send only the notifications to the customer only once per day. In that case, you can go for it. But so far, I've never seen any of the customers who had chosen F1. And we do have few other plans here and it is measured in ACU, 100 total ACU. Let's move on to the production environment. Here also it starts from 100, 200, 400 and 800 ACU. Each and every ACU you choose, it comes with the below configuration. We are looking for staging slot, wherein that's nothing but my deployment slot and also backup. Some of the app service plan comes with traffic manager also. I do have an isolated environment. Do you see the ACU is pretty high and the money is also very high? That's because if the customer's concern, as per the compliance policy, is that they need to have their app in a dedicated virtual machine. In that case, they can choose isolated environment. I'm going to choose production environment for us. Let's see if S1 works. Sometimes if S1 is not available for your portal, you can choose P1 V2 or any other P series. I'm going to start from S1. Let's see if it works. Monitoring. I don't need any monitoring as of now. If I enable monitoring, I get the app insights. I'll create the app service now. I'm going to pause the video for 2 minutes. Our app service creation is ready. Let's get inside the app. Our app's name is K21 Tech and see how exactly it looks like. Now, how do I see the main page? Click on the browse option here and it takes you to the main page. This is how your app is going to look like, wherein we have chosen the basic .NET inbuilt application. Do you see the name of my app, which is K21 Tech? But I'm worried that my customers can see the Azure websites.net also, through which they will get to know that I have hosted my app in Azure. So we have custom domain option to change it. And also we can have our authentication and authorization via AD. Do you see here the say scale up and scale out option, which is nothing but our vertical scaling, which is scale up and down. And what is this vertical scaling here? When I click on here, it takes me to the main app ACU choice. If I feel that the traffic is more, I can always change it, or due to my compliance requirements, if I want to move to isolated environment, I can also move towards isolated, or if I really want to come down, I can go to dev test. Scale out and scale in, which is the horizontal scaling, and this page exactly looks like the virtual machine scale set page. I can do auto scaling based on a particular rule or based on a particular metric. For example, one of the metric can be the CPU percentage. So like how we did the virtual machine scale sets lab, you can also play around with multiple option. The most important option here is the deployment slot. What is this deployment slot? Currently, I can see that my code is running in K21 Tech. What is this slot means and what do you mean by swap? In order to understand this, let's go to whiteboard and understand the DevOps lifecycle. What I'm drawing here is the main app page, which is K21 Tech. And here I do have my version 1 code of running, which is my production code. And usually what happens when I have the code, it goes through the build and test phase. There are multiple sub activities in this particular step alone, but if we categorize them into one particular life cycle, it's the build and test module. The output is nothing but the artifacts, which is the executable file which is ready to hit the final page. Let's say that I'm working on one more code, which is the version 2 of code. It's still not in production. The version 2 code also should go through the same life cycle, which is the build and test and also artifacts. And finally, one day it hits. If I really want to change the complete UI of my page, I can do this. Now in this app service, this is the deployment slot which we already have. Now let's do one thing. We will clone it to one more version 2 and also take one more code. Since we don't have any code available, let's get it from Visual Studio 2019. But I hope you understand the complete life cycle of DevOps. I know this is a complete layman term. In AZ 400, which is the DevOps certified engineer, you will get the complete life cycle and what are all the Azure products which supports each and every life cycle of this complete process. This is my version 1 code which is running. Now I'm going to add the slot and clone it. I'm going to call it as V2. Yes, clone the settings from K21 Tech. It's done. Now I have two different codes, but they all have the same main page because I've just cloned it. So let's open the first page here. Go to the main page, browse, and also go to the deployment slot. Choose our second page, the second slot, and here also we have the browse option. Okay, so both are same. Now that I've taken the clone of my production environment as V2, which is almost like my backup, I'm going to put a new code to my K21 Tech, or I can also push it to version 2 and then push it to the production also. However you want, you can do it, or if you want, you can add more slots and keep multiple versions of code, multiple versions of backup also, but it depends upon the ACU that you choose. The app service plan has limited staging slots. Here I'm going to get a sample code from Visual Studio 2019. ASP.NET Core is what I have chosen. Web application, K21 version 2 is the name of my app. It comes with the default API option. Let me move on to web application. Now here is our app. I'm going to publish this app to my version 2 of deployment slot. Publish, and here straight away I have my app service which gets integrated to Visual Studio 2019. I don't have to create a profile. I already have an app service plan. Yeah, serverless is my resource group. K21Tech is the app name. I have two deployment slot wherein version 1 is the only non-production slot that I have. So I'm going to push my code to version 1. Okay, it's done, and this is opening from my local repository. Okay, K21 version 2. I'm in the portal. Now let's see how the version 2 looks like. Browse. Okay, now this is my new UI, wherein the old one is this one. So we are going to push the new code as our production code now. I'm going to close all these and let's do a swap. It doesn't change the name, just the code, the content of V2 gets moved to the production environment. V2 to the production. The swap is going on. Imagine how easy it is with the PaaS environment. This is the first time Microsoft has introduced PaaS into their infrastructure course, which means slowly the industry is moving towards the platform as a service more than infrastructure as a service. We can also say that the definition of infrastructure is changed. Imagine doing the same swap in virtual machine. Here, while we are speaking, within 2 minutes it gets done successfully. If we have to do it in virtual machine, then we need to have multiple tools. One set of tools to maintain the source code, another set of tools for build and test, another set of tools to maintain my artifacts. I also have to maintain my own virtual machine, the operating system. Here it is totally operating system independent. So let's go to my main page and see how exactly my main page looks like. It should be version 2. We got it done. So K21 version 2 is our new web page now. That's how smooth it is. While the swap is going on, if you do multiple refresh, I'm sure you will not get 404 error or there will not be any packet drop. Apart from the deployment slots, you can also have other backup options available, which is pretty much like the virtual machine backup that we have seen. If the purpose of the customer is only to maintain a static web page or an app wherein they will work with multiple deployment slots, then web apps is the right product wherein you can maintain different deployment slots and you can push it to production seamlessly without any issue. And also, if your customer is not happy with the latest code, they can anytime swap it to the previous version.
So, that was a clip taken from one of the modules of our step-by-step training program on Azure Administrator Certification. That's AZ104. I would like to invite you for a free masterclass on how to kickstart your journey as Azure Administrator, right from learning basics like cloud concepts, networking, storage, and getting certified by using our step-by-step 12-week roadmap to go from complete beginner to a certified Azure Administrator. If you're interested, register for a free class by going on to k21academy.com/az10402. I highly recommend you to go through this free class to see what to expect in the exam, learn basics about Azure Administrator Certification, and to get a demo on deploying web servers. So, k21academy.com/az10402. Please click on the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our future videos. I will see you in another episode of Azure video series from K21 Academy. Till then, take care.